Welcome to Triple T and Me. I am so grateful that today my guest is my good friend Chase Smith. How you doing, Chase?
Very well, Padawan. How are you?
I'm doing well. My only friend that calls me Padawan. Explain why you do that, Chase.
So you and I were in theater together. It would have been my junior year, your sophomore year. And I ended up I was more or less the set carpenter because I was the only one who knew how to use a drill and a hammer. And so that I had someone to help me, I taught you how to use both those. You were kind of like my Padawan learner. And I remember saying, just do what I tell you and, think about it later. And you that's how you learned. And so you got the nickname Padawan. Called you that ever since.
Yes,
It's a term of endearment.
yes, I was very glad that you were there because if you weren't there, we would have been in a world of hurt. And I wish you could have had a better Padawan, but that showed how good of a teacher you were because you could even teach me a thing or two. So Chase, growing up in Crawford County, what are some of the top memories that when you reflect on growing up, what are some memories that just come to mind instantly?
You hear stories now about the way things are in schools and how tough it is. And I remember I had a very different environment growing up. I remember I was in the sixth grade. It was towards the end of the year, and my fifth and sixth grade teachers took a group of the guys in our class. It was basically the starting five of the basketball team, and then Brad McDaniel and I were the other two. They took us to toilet paper our fourth grade teacher's house. Okay. It wasn't until it was way too late for us to realize we were all being set up. Right. So we get to his house, we get out, and it's about 20 seconds later that they scare us. One of the guys who at the time held all the sprinting records and the distance records in the county for running, he will tell you that on the way back to the truck, I actually passed him as I jumped, tucked, and rolled into the truck. I only tell that story because it just shows the level of trust that our parents had to have had in us. Granted, we were being set up. We weren't actually going to vandalize somebody's house. But the level of trust our parents had in my fifth and sixth grade teachers, and the level of trust that, they had for us that we were going to do something absolutely crazy while we were there. It just shows the different environment that I grew up in. Now, I also think about when my sister was running cross country, my sister Katie, and we just found out we were going to go to semi-state for the first time. And I remember Mr. Cox coming over where all the parents were sitting. She's like, grab your cameras. Everybody grab your cameras, because it was a really, really big deal that the team was going to go. And I remember Danny Rothrock had the team flag on this piece of PVC, and he was running up and down the side of the court. And it just showed for a sport that wasn't a class sport that, the school, a relatively small school, was going to semi-state. It was a really, really cool experience.
That's awesome. So you've lived in Crawford County pretty much your whole life. What are some of your favorite things about living in Crawford County?
Yeah, actually, my family's lived in Crawford County since Memorial Day weekend of 1991. It was the week before my second birthday. I don't remember that exactly. I remember tearing down the old house. Actually, I remember my grandfather let me pull down one of the walls. Actually, he was standing behind me, and I thought I pulled it down. Dad built a new house more or less by himself, but that was over the following year, and I've lived the same house ever since. But when I think about Crawford County, I always think about how generous people are, right? We live in either the poorest or the second poorest county, depending on what math system you're using. And the generosity is just overwhelming. I remember when Katrina happened. I mean, it was a terrible experience for the country, and especially for those in Louisiana. But what I remember is that, in the Marengo warehouse, they stored, and they still actually store it, a bunch of meals ready to eat, or MREs. And they were shipping all of them down for hurricane relief, a bunch of them. And they'd actually had too many semis show up. And so these semis were trekked out from the entrance to the warehouse all the way down 66 through Marengo and on towards English. and they were stuck there for hours at a time. There was no place for them to go. But people were going to local restaurants and bringing them food so that they could stay with their trucks. And, just that was our part in trying to help people. I think about, I serve on the CivLARF board, the Southern Indiana Veterans Living and Rehabilitation Facility Board. And one of the ways that we help veterans out is we held a yard sale. Now, this is a yard sale we had, was that weekend, which was during COVID, mind you. We raised $10,000 for the facility, help out a lot of people, and we've done a lot of good with that money. And it just astounded me, the generosity. I also think about my junior or senior year when Mrs. Schwartz was really sick, and at a pep rally, we all raised money, whatever money we had on us, just a little something to help them out. And it was, whatever we had on us. And, even, I know you don't like to talk about this, Tyler, but the first time I'd ever heard the last name Colbert was in relation to Travis when he was really sick. And I remember we all did a little to fundraise there. It's just the generosity of Crawford County is always something that's just amazed me. And that's why I love the community so much. And there's it's such a welcoming group of people. And so when problems happen, when crime it continues to get worse and the drug problem continues to get worse, and these things just aren't being addressed the way they should, it's really painful to me. That's part of the reasons why I'm running for office.
You're right. It's such a generous community. And yes, my family felt so supported in that time. You're running for county prosecutor. So tell us about when and why you decided to do so.
Sure. Well, actually, I was going to mention that you happen to be wearing a Butler Blue Chase Smith t-shirt. Well done. You're a UK fan, so anytime I can get you in Butler Blue, it's always a mark of pride for me. When did I decide to run for office? Well, I was raised in a family that has always appreciated public service, right? My dad retired as a lieutenant colonel. My mom was a staff sergeant. Actually, mom and dad met in the Indiana National Guard. That's why I'm here, because they decided to serve. And that was just the mentality that I grew up with. My grandmother volunteered at a soup kitchen and a food pantry for years. And I was just taught, serving your fellow man whenever you can, however you can, is what you're supposed to do. And I was trying to figure out what is the best way for me to serve. I was 12 when I started getting interested in the law. And originally I was thinking about doing, a work with veterans groups, actually doing wills for veterans. And then around that time, my family was the victim of a robbery. They'd actually broken into our house and stolen a bunch of things. And I remember that I had nightmares for a very long time after that. Your sense of security was just taken from you. And that's when I started to be interested in, crime and punishment, right? And justice for victims. And then as I got older, went to college, I started interning for Keith Henderson in New Albany. The summer after my freshman year, I started interning for him, and I did that through college, the holiday breaks, and then I took a part-time position, then a full-time position in 2014. Then I went to law school and took some time off, then came back as a certified legal intern. And to be honest, I didn't know that I wanted to do criminal law at one point. I was tired, I was burnt out. And then my boss was working on this case. It was a serial killer case, ended up being a capital murder case. And it was then that I realized that justice is important, and it's important for the defendant, and it's important for the victims' families. And I thought back to, when my own family, they never caught the person who burglarized our house. And so our family never really got that closure. But there is something very powerful about when someone is found guilty and their victim gets to see, 12 people in a jury say, you agree that, what he did was wrong and he needs to be punished for it.
I appreciate you sharing that. So if you had the opportunity to sit down with every registered voter in Crawford County, what would you tell them as they are considering who to vote for this position of county prosecutor?
I mean, obviously, I would ask for your support, right? And I'm currently a deputy prosecuting attorney in Jefferson County in Madison, Indiana, and I drive 3 hours a day, an hour and a half both ways. That's not a woe is me sort of thing. That's a dedication thing. Dedication is really important to this job. I've worked under two very different prosecutors, and I'm proud to have done so. Very different managerial styles, very different courtroom styles, very different styles in the public. And I think that having a breadth of experience is really important, right? You have to develop your own style as prosecutor. Both of them have told me that. You have to learn your way of doing things. And I think just having a broader experience is better for everybody. My entire career has been in criminal law, whether it be misdemeanors or felonies or, infraction court, which is not as much fun as it sounds, juvenile court, right? Which is one of my big focuses right now, is that I'm in charge of the juvenile docket in Jefferson County. Having that experience is vital to being able to do a job well. And when I decided to run for prosecutor, it was many years ago, right? Now, as for when it was going to be, that was a little more recent. But, I announced I was running in October of last year. And I said then what I believe now, and I believed then, that I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for Crawford County, right? I'm running based on my experience, my qualifications, and what I want to do for the county, right? The way I would prosecute cases, the way that I would deal with habitual criminals, the way that I would deal with juveniles. All of that has to do with the way I would do things, not the way anybody else would. And I would appreciate the support of every voter on November 8th.
Well, thanks so much, Chase.
I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Vote Chase November 8th.